All right, guys. Well, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you here. Got Jeff with us here from Australia, from Argon Co, and likewise with Richard from Hamilton. So, wanted to welcome you to the podcast. Today, we're talking about how to go from, the journey from manual to automated systems. I guess just to kick things off, want to maybe get a bit of a backstory on automation in both Australia and New Zealand from you guys. I know you been in this industry, you're very well respected in the intralogistics industry, so quite keen to maybe you guys can give us a bit of a brief background and
I think it's important when you're determined, like when you're looking to embark on the automation journey, trying to go from manual to automated. It's important to understand how we got to where we got, right? And it really did all start off, 50 years ago with steam-powered AMRs pallet cranes. Right, and along the way, we've had that technology develop quite quickly. Well, 50 years. I don't know if you can call that quickly, but
before my time.
Before all of our time, I'd say.
Have any of you seen a steam-powered?
I haven't seen steam-powered, but I have seen a site that was built, I think, mid-70s in Sydney.
Okay.
So huge cabinet, old kind of. Circuit breakers, like really old school, right? You just go to see how the technology has developed.
Yeah.
But it all started off, I think, really simply put, someone thinking, okay, we're in a warehouse and we do a lot of repetitive tasks. Just like any kind of process automation process where someone's thinking, okay, the repetitive tasks are the ones that I want to automate. So it started off kind of thinking, okay, I've got a pallet. How can I move that more efficiently into storage? And they created a steam-powered at the time. I think they moved very quickly into just electric.
Yeah.
But essentially big cranes running down aisles that can move in the X, Y, and Z direction to put the pallet away.
Yeah.
And over time, we saw the crane automated storage and retrieval systems. We call them pallet ASRSs. We saw them developing to go deeper, multi-deep using the same load handling device, just with extending kind of telescopic arms. And then also we saw the development of kind of the mother-baby solutions, as we call them, where you'd hold some type of satellite on the load handling device, and that could go even deeper, 10, 20, 30 pallets deep. And then I think somewhere along the line, like all of us, we're all tinkerers, we're thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the line, someone said, wait, if I can do that for a pallet, why can't I do it for a carton?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the mini load systems came out. I think we're all quite technically creative, but often when we name things, we're not very creative. We keep it very simple. It's a loading system and it's mini, so we call it a mini load.
Or acronyms, right?
Yes, and we're always focused on our three-letter acronyms, right?
It's always three-letter acronyms.
That's the most important part of our business. As long as you turn it in, even though mini load and ASRS they don't have three-letter acronyms, but I'd say we got better at that in the last 20 years. So then mini load systems became a thing, but again, you have a crane, and it's basically a single point of failure, relatively low throughputs as well. Usually you're talking in the 20s and 30s per hour. So it's not high throughput, right? And then that's when, again, great thinkers out there, Canap says that they're the first ones that created the shuttle system, right? So now all of a sudden you're decoupling.
Were they?
As far as I know, they were. The
Yeah.
OSR stands for Order Storage Retrieval.
Okay.
If you go back in history, I've spoken to Dematic, Van der Lande. They're the ones that say that they were pretty close. They actually admit that it was Canap that came up with it as well. So as far as we know, Canap was the first one to use the shuttle instead of the molten mini load.
Mm-hmm.
Shuttles have been used in manufacturing, and the concept of a shuttle moving in a kind of X direction back and forth is very common. So it was about then putting a shuttle on every level, a lift out the front. You're decoupling those movements, massively increasing the throughput. So a shuttle aisle now can do 500 movements an hour as opposed to the 2030. So it's an order of magnitude change. And then I think that became kind of the mainstay. And to be honest, and as we talk about the journey that people have to take from going to manual to automation, you go back 15 years before mobile automation became a big thing, you really only had that kind of real fixed, heavy infrastructure model, and it meant that there was huge capex associated. So the leap used to be a chasm, right? It used to be a huge leap, not only in terms of the processes, in terms of the facility, and in terms of capital required to make this happen. And that's where I think 2011, as the story is told, the original Kiva robots.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Kiva.
Right?
Yep.
Kiva. Anyone that knows their history about automation, Kiva was created what I call the Roomba. The mobile robot with a shelf on top of it. Amazon saw that this was a game changer.
Yeah.
They went, they snapped them up. They said, this is our technology now. Managed to lock out the industry for a good 7 years.
Yeah, it was a decent amount of time, right?
And then luckily our friends in China, Geek Plus, I think they were the ones that really were kind of copying the technology, developed their own platform and came to market. 2017, roughly, we started seeing them coming out with a viable platform. But, and we've really accelerated from that. The last 7 years, mobile automation has just become a mainstay.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where we've really gone from the whole large capital investment, big infrastructure project, because you can't just retrofit some of these old solutions into existing sheds very easily, to basically... You can put these mobile automation solutions anywhere.
Small, medium businesses even.
Absolutely. Yeah. Basically anyone, right? I think there's even, and I've been part of proof of concepts where you're thinking commercial buildings. You've got 2.4 to 3 meter ceiling height inside an office. I know during COVID and after COVID, commercial buildings, their vacancy rates have gone up quite high, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people go to offices that much anymore.
Yeah.
So the idea of putting fulfillment centers into office commercial buildings has grown legs, right? Or grown wheels, if we want to use the correct analogy.
But I've heard of, the likes of AutoStore being in shopping centers for, just bringing product down to people and having, it's just different ways of using technology that weren't really possible before. It's
Absolutely.
It seems to be moving fairly quickly and opening up all these different types of opportunities, right?
Yes.
I always find it really fascinating that, when we talk to some clients, they think a lot of this technology, even the likes of an ARS system, is new technology. And you talk about steam, it goes back so far, right? So
absolutely. That's why I use the steam analogy, because they have been around for quite a lot. They have been around for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And the key note that I want to make there as we transition to the rest of this discussion, when people are choosing their automation to go on the journey with, it's important to know that some of this technology has been around for 50 years, and therefore the kind of the software behind it has been developed for 50 years. And some of the technology has only been around for 15 years. So therefore the smarts and the technology behind that technology, like mobile automation, isn't as developed. And that's where the challenge can lie. You can get a lot more complexity built into a standard ASRS shuttle system, or the ones that are quite well developed, been around for a long time. You can't just catch up in 15 years to something that's been developed for 30 to 50 years. And that both from a functionality, software functionality, but also safety as well. The actual engineering safety, the whole process. So the way that I actually got into automation, I tell my story. 2011, November, I actually fell in love for the second time. And that was when I saw my first pallet.
You didn't tell your wife that, did you?
I did. That's why I say the second time. If I said it was my first time falling in love, I'd be in big trouble. But I saw a pallet ASRS system, and I just thought, this is amazing, right? I'm obsessed. And I went and I started a business that was basically the big gap that I saw even then, and this was with the big guys installing big infrastructure projects. The big gap was around meeting the regional safety requirements. So I had a business that was installing safety fencing, light curtains, interlocks, all of the equipment to make sure, keeping the people safe from the robots and the robots safe from the people.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, so that's just as an undertone. When people are going on that journey, they need to understand different technology is mature in different ways. And that's where you often get caught out.
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of that's because of, I guess, the fact that they are hardware companies who are going back to the point of, maybe the software not being as mature as some of the older technology? Do you think that's often because they're hardware businesses, the software is necessary, but...
I think everybody definitely cares about it and everyone's thinking about it. The problems are always that there's multiple there's no simple kind of incident, you know what I mean? There's like, everyone knows the Swiss cheese model, there's layers of protection, layers of safety, and that sort of thing. And you know, if issues are going to come up, it's generally because there's a combination of events that have come together to cause the incident. Yeah. So it is just really important to weave that thinking holistically into a project, because if you give any one part of your project, like you give the builders, or you give the automation guys, or you give, you know, the operations guys that task to do, they'll look at it from where they stand and what they know. There's a multidisciplinary problem that we've got to address in a project, and that's something we do a lot with, actually, is we lead the safety and design work streams on our projects, and that's about getting it's safe to construct, safe to operate, safe to maintain, and safe to decommission or dispose of at the end, right through the project, including. So
do you go back into the operations as well? Is it like, you know, operating procedures and...
It's got to be safe to operate, right? And it has to be intuitive to operate for it to be safe in a lot of ways as well. So there's lots of human factor stuff. Yeah. You know.
I guess that's like, I get that, like from our perspective as integrators, we deal a lot with the safety system, right? We do all the risk assessment, go through that process with the client, but we can advise on the operational procedures, but that's really up to the business. Like we don't do that.
Yeah, and that's why we say it's multidisciplinary, right? You don't have control of some of those hazards and risks. No. And the combination of events, different actions by different people is, you know, one of the key contributors to incidents. And so that's about bringing everyone together so everybody understands it.
Yeah. No.
I think a really important call out is when you're going from manual to automated, you're not necessarily putting a different hat on. Yeah. Okay. When you look at a proper manual end-to-end warehouse operation, most of the time you can find them very mature, right? They've also developed their safety requirements, their egress, their pedestrian versus MHE, all of that has developed quite well. Even the processes around picking, around packing, around consolidating, replenishing, very well developed. What often happens is when people think, okay, I'm going to now put in an automation piece into that, they focus just on the automation piece and they forget about the multidisciplinary end-to-end view. Okay. And that's honestly, like, you know, with the fuzzy logics, with the studio, you know, the pre-Argon, how we built our businesses was I came out of Dematic, right? Yep. So I saw how Dematic...
The training school.
An amazing training school, always will be forever grateful for the time that I spent there. Yeah. But what I learned there was that our scope was the automation piece, right? And basically anything outside of that scope, just like you're saying, as a system integrator, you don't have the control of that. But often your scope in the automation piece is the most expensive part that's going into the warehouse. Yeah. So people, you know, the client saying, okay, I'm paying these people millions of dollars to give me some automation. And often they believe incorrectly that they're solving the end-to-end operational problem. And that's what gets missed. Right. And that's really what we've always been coming in saying, hey, it's not an automation problem, it's an operation problem. Automation is just a use case. It's just a mechanization of a repetitive process, just like the steam-powered crane was at the beginning, for a repetitive process within the total operation. Right, and that's the piece that people really miss.
So what's that? You know, from your guys' perspective, what's that journey or that process that needs to be taken to go from manual to automated? Like that's a big question, but you know, zooming out, how does someone with a medium-sized business how do they get there? Like the goal for me is not necessarily to automate, but there's, you know, a lot of benefits that automation can bring. Like, what is that? What's the journey?
I think probably the first thing I'd say is that the biggest thing that probably handicaps that journey, if we sort of flip it around the other way, is people trying to do it too quickly. Right. I think organizations have to think a bit strategically about this and go, right, well, you know, automation, there's a strong trend in that direction, and it's not necessarily right for everybody right now, but it is coming more and more and more, right? Like I've been in this line of work for 20 years doing business cases for DC designs, you know, new sites, refit sites for more than 20 years now. And there's always been automation options on the table, right, since the 20 years ago beginnings. But increasingly they're getting over the line more and more and more, and that rate is increasing, right? So it's happening.
More accessible, right?
Yeah, it's become more accessible. It's become easier to do. The industry's maturity to cope with that technology and their businesses has improved, you know, and operate it successfully. So all of that has been strongly, and it's building and building and building and building, right?
Yeah.
Organizations need to be strategic about the fact that they need to be thinking about it.
Yeah.
Even if it's not now or not right now, they need to have a bit of a plan for it.
Yeah.
And it's not like going and buying a car, right? Where you can walk out into the dealership and come out with this thing that's just going to work and it's fully formed. You've got to align your business processes to it, because the flexibility may not be as easy to do. The institutional knowledge about how to do it is baked into your team's heads.
Yeah.
All of that sort of stuff. Data has to be good. There's all these enablers that you need to put in place to be foundational, so that the automation can be implemented. It's going to take time to do that, and people look at it and go, well, if I take a couple of months to work out the solution I need and then go into a contract to get that delivered, and then it gets delivered in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or whatever the type of system takes to do, that's overlooking the fact that you've, in parallel, got to build the capability of the business to accept that and use it correctly. And that's actually one of the things that adds significant time. But it's also something people can do even if they're not prepared to commit to the automation spend yet. Right? So people can be laying that foundation now and to pre-build their capability to do that.
Yeah. And what do you call that? Like, is that an automation blueprint? Is that
it's an
operational blueprint?
It's a roadmap.
It's a roadmap.
Start with operation, and I think keeping it simple. I've always preached the same message. Every warehouse I've ever walked into has 7 functions, right? Inbound, put away, inbound, receiving, put away, replenishment, picking, packing, and dispatch.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? And you have to start there. It's a process engine. We're engineers. We always go back to the first principles. Break it down into functional processes. What do you need to achieve? Within each one, what are the people? What are the system? What are the process requirements? Right? You should be at a level of maturity at each process where you understand what you're doing, you understand the productivities in terms of labor, because that's how you're going to build a business case, right? One of the key reasons that automation is becoming more prevalent is that the inflationary cost drivers of a P&L of a warehouse, namely property cost and people cost, they're constantly going up, right? And they're at such levels, especially in Australia and New Zealand, that, automation stacks up. So understanding where those inflationary cost drivers are embedded in your business, that's where you need to start. You need to think about your warehouse. And this is, for me, it was quite natural because when I started first, I was in manufacturing.
Okay. Likewise,
so and manufacturing thinks like this already.
Correct.
The lean principles, the process thinking, all of that. All I did, unashamedly, I just stole that and put it into dusty old shit. That's what we've all done,
that's
right?
What we all did, yeah.
And that's where you start. You have to build a blueprint. You got to stop thinking automation and always think operation, because that's where people get caught out.
I want to pick on a word that Jeff threw out there without really realizing how significant it is, right? Which is requirements. So when you're coming back to business case development for any kind of change, right? And doing automation, either retrofit or going to a new shed and thinking about whether that's manual, automated, or whatever you're doing, you've got to be able to trace the line from what you're doing back to the business's needs, right? And we call that requirements. So you set out your strategic organizational priorities, right? So strategic things like we're moving into this market, or we're going to grow, or we're going to optimize for margins, or we need to improve service levels in order to win in the marketplace and preserve businesses, right? Especially important in places like retail. So you've got to come from there, and you need to not spend too much to deliver that. So you need to know what that is, so that you can go, strategic priorities look like this. Then we descend that down into the operation that we need to build to deliver that successfully to the client. What are the commercial parameters? And then you get into technical stuff, right? So all that functionality and then like nuts and bolts of technical engineering stuff lives several layers down the tree. And you need to actually have the ability to trace every one of those requirements back up the tree to go, how's it serving these requirements? There's like lots of good thinking around how to manage requirements. And then when we build it, we've got to be able to test back against, have we actually, the business charged us with delivering this outcome? Right? Did we? Right? So can we trace line of sight from what we said we were setting out to achieve down to what are we actually committing to spend money on and do, back up to did we actually achieve that, and then business like benefit tracking is actually overlooked in these projects. Did we actually hit it?
Did you get it? Yeah.
And how soon did we get it, right? Did we need to hit that at the 3-month mark, or what about 6 months? Is that okay? Or what about 1 month? What about 2 weeks, you know?
Yeah, well, I guess this is what a consultant brings to the party, right?
Yeah.
He's often like companies try and do it on their own, thinking that they're going to save money or, you know, and then it's working with an automation company directly. Like that can be okay if that company has the in-house capabilities or the automation company is you know, has the client's best interest it needs. But yeah, well, from your perspective, like what is it that the consultancy brings to the table?
See, we're all about keeping it simple, right? And businesses usually like to take that pragmatic approach as well.
Yeah.
But keeping it simple can also often get mean that, hey, we don't need to document stuff. And you do. You know, to Richard's point, for posterity at a very minimum, you know, to make sure you hit that business case, to be able to trace back why decisions were made, right? Why do we have this functional requirement? Oh, it's tied to this all critical business strategic requirement. Yeah. Right? You're a retailer and customer is first. Therefore, you have a time limit on how long it can take to pick an order, as an example. So that's really where we're able to take the view of, we understand your business, we understand the technology, we understand how to bring them together, but we capture every step of the way so that anyone that walks in later understands, it's documented why decisions were made. And again, to Richard's point, how are we measuring success? Yeah. Because that's really where things get lost. They just do it by the seat of their pants. Everyone has good intentions. I've never seen people come into these projects with bad intentions. But in the act of just running instead of walking and taking your time and capturing, things get missed. A lot of verbal discussions potentially get misinterpreted.
Yeah, or not documented,
or not
right?
documented at all, exactly. Yeah. And that can really be where we add a lot of value. Before we even get into the fact that we used to work with automation vendors, we've done hundreds of these projects. Yeah. You know, we know what goes wrong. We've actually screwed things up along the way, so we've learnt the hard way as well. So we bring that to the table.
Yeah, I would say if you were to summarize it, any kind of change, consultants are for change, consultants are for projects, right? Like you don't need consultants if what you want to do is fine tune your business or manage it. You know, look, we're not that kind of consultant anyway. So consultants are for projects are when you want to get something done. You know, and you what you need to live within your business to deliver or to operate the thing that you deliver in the end is a subset of the project required to get you there, right? Yeah. So what we do is we come in as the pinch hitters and the grunt alongside a client. We bring that expertise and history of having been there before, and we bring the third party aspect of a party that can be in between or alongside the other parties that need to be working together, where there's often, you know, significant commercial contracts in play, and you need someone that can actually facilitate that relationship in a lot of ways as well. You know, otherwise it can become quite adversarial because it's like we don't trust these guys.
Yeah, it's almost just a transaction.
And so we translate.
Right?
And we bring the project teams together. And we help manage that through. And so I think a big part of the benefit of it is we can settle down the issues that aren't really issues. You know, we can help our clients understand what people are telling them so that they're making good decisions, because they have to make decisions, right? And they need to be able to understand what they're doing and get advice on how to make the right choices. We bring a significant amount of technical depth to that to make sure that people like yourselves are doing the things that you said you would and the right things, and that what you say is going to happen is what's going to happen. And, you know, we can hold you to that if necessary, but preferably we help you get there by helping the client deliver to you the right information for you to do your job as well. So big cause of issues in projects is when there's a translation issue between what one side needs or one outfit needs from another, and they think they've agreed upon the exchange of that information or the commitment that they've made, and they haven't quite delivered. You know, projects are big and complex, right? There's so many ways for it to go wrong. I would also recommend for anyone considering doing projects of this type, great book called How Big Things Get Done. I can't remember the name of the book. Really good book. Great audio book if you drive a lot.
I love audiobooks.
Yeah. So sitting on planes, as you probably do.
Yeah.
That's probably the book that's come up with the best way of capturing in a short way what I've always kind of understood, which is about thinking slow and acting fast.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
That's another book, right?
No, that's
No,
the book.
that's
it's not the title of the book. It's just the thesis of.
There's another book called exactly that.
Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, okay.
That's quite different. I've read that too.
Oh, you've read that?
Yeah.
Is that worth a read?
It is worth a read, but it's about how people think.
Okay.
But this is about
psychology.
how projects happen.
Okay. Yeah.
So thinking slow and acting fast is about knowing what you're going to do and how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you know what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, the project's actually quite easy. Right.
Yeah.
So what you do is you spend the time to understand the commitments you're going to make, get the design right, do all the planning work, and queue it all up, and then you hit it hard, right? Then you come in with all the resource, and you guys, the contractors get on board, they resource up, and everybody goes hard in one direction, and then you get it done. Because the money starts to flow when you put the contractors on the job, and you start digging into the ground and pouring concrete and fabricating steel and writing software. That's when the project curve starts to spin, right?
And that's when the changes really hurt.
Yeah, and that's where if you haven't gotten it right and you've got to go back and change the design or do something because a business need wasn't understood and communicated, it's not easy to do later, right? Everybody's seen that crossover curve where it's like...
I've heard of plenty of projects going like wrong
everybody's
at that
got
point,
horror
right?
stories, right?
Yeah.
Late stage design change is hugely risky, lots of money. So it's about taking the time and being disciplined about building the requirements, building the design and doing the plan, and then you pull the trigger, pour the resources into the project and land the benefit, right? That's how you get success out of these things.
And maybe just going back to why it is worth getting external support, consulting support. I think Richard mentioned the translation, right? From technical, like the business itself is going to know their operation and their business and their requirements better than the vendor or the consultant will, right? The vendor will know their automation better than the consultant or the client will, right? But what the consultant does is it understands how to translate business requirements into technical requirements and act as that independent. So that's another key word. So translator, independent.
Often agnostic to technology.
I believe personally, we strongly believe consultants have to be agnostic because otherwise there is a conflict of interest. And we've seen it in the market. We won't talk about it this time, but we can
I've seen it recently.
There's a lot of conflict of interest where, consultants have some type of affiliation to technology or to property, and it just leads to suboptimal outcomes.
Yeah, I get there's often you're always going to have preferred vendors you work with, right? People you trust, people you know that can deliver. Like you're not just going to throw that out to anyone, right? But I do think
that's them, right? It's about the relationship. Why we're talking to you is because we've already got that relationship with you and the Automate X team from your positions here, from previous roles as well. We have the same relationship with all the vendors because that serves us during delivery, and when things get to crisis mode, serves us even more.
Yeah, I feel like you need that too. Like if you're learning about technology that's coming out, like you get that from the suppliers, from the integrators. Like there needs to be that relationship there, like with everyone, like to make sure that what you are recommending to your client is going to be a good solution, right?
Yeah, and also just take an example like doing a design, right? Like if there wasn't a consultant in the picture, right? So let's say client goes out, brings up 10 different automation suppliers and go, I want a design from every one of you. Yeah. All 10 of them have got to put a designer or a design team onto the problem and put that forward. The industry's got to pay for that.
Correct.
Right? Yep. Someone is going to foot the bill. Yeah. Right? That's not free. So, what we do is we kind of cut through a lot of that noise, right? And we can what we do is actually try and make contractors' lives easier because that is actually enabling the industry to deliver for better cost. And that's more productive.
Yes,
right?
Very true. Yeah.
Often we get vendors coming to us and saying, "Hey, these people have been potentially kicking the tires for a couple of years,
and they don't know what they want.
They don't know what they want. Can you talk to them and help them?"
Yeah.
And then they know that by the time we get to market with them with an RFP, we've got a clean data set. Right? Yeah. Data is super important to automation. Yeah. We haven't talked about that yet, but the confidence, another key word that I'd like to use around the consultancy is that confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence in design level, because when I started, I remember I would see vendor proposals come back and the business case always looked great because we were just focused on the picking function. Right?
Yeah.
One of the things that Baz and I know Richard was involved in doing this as well, we pushed back hard and said, hey, you can't just take picking into consideration. What about the replenishment? Making sure that at least within the automation, you're taking all the inputs into that business case. It's not just all of a sudden your picking's amazing. You still have to feed the beast.
Correct.
Right? You still have to get someone with a higher skill set that's now going to be your systems and inventory person, your maintenance person. Is that built into your business case?
Yeah.
Maintenance contracts didn't used to be built into them. The replenishment function wasn't.
Software,
all the exceptions. One of the biggest things that we did early days, and I won't name vendors, but it happened with everyone, was they would focus on happy path, because by the time that you get on site, right, you've done all your planning, you've got a commercial contract, okay? As much as we all want to, make good business and make friends, we have commercial contracts, and we have to try to make some money. And what I would find was the testing that would happen on site was really just happy path testing. And then, so we came in and we focused just on exceptions.
Could you explain that?
So happy path testing. Okay, so let's say I'm a goods to person picking station.
Yeah.
So the testing that would happen was I would send one order to that station.
Yeah.
And I would pick it.
Yeah.
And I would confirm the pick. And if it was confirmed, the test was passed.
Okay.
Yeah. So we added all
function,
the exceptions. We were like, what happens if the product's damaged? What happens if the product's not there? You thought that there was 10, you only have 5. All of those exceptions, the integration that's required to send that message back up to the host, get that confirmation, to sort that out, that can cripple your system. It's not the happy path that makes your system successful. It's how quickly you recover from exceptions that makes your system successful.
That's a really key point with automation journey side of things that I really want anyone considering going on that journey to really understand, right? There is a guy in your warehouse right now that knows that the shipment that's leaving to Te Awamutu at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning needs to be packed differently from the others.
Yeah.
If that's not in the system's not going to do it.
Right, you won't do it.
But you guys on the floor know that stuff, and people are really good at problem solving their way around those types of problems on the fly. Automation won't do it. Right? So if you don't understand all of your business exceptions, all of the businesses, that's a requirement, is that our shed needs to pack this differently for some customers, like this requirement. Yeah. Right? Really key point.
There's 2 key messages that I always deliver to a client that's starting this journey. Okay, one of them is around the fact that they need to move from being a warehouse, and this is kind of just a thought process, going from being a warehouse to being a distribution center. Okay, and that's around the 7 functions of the warehouse, having set processes within them. Okay, and the reason that you need to be able to then move towards a system driven, everything needs to be in the system. The heuristics involved with human factor, you can't replicate that in the system, right? The more you go automation, so message number 1, make sure that you're thinking end-to-end process, that you're thinking about warehouse, dusty old shed, you just store things however you can and you do your best every day. Distribution center, set processes, each function has kind of a standard operating procedure that you understand, right? And then the second piece is when you go for automation, the common misconception is that automation provides flexibility. It's actually the opposite. Automation removes flexibility from your operation. There's nothing, to Richard's point, there's nothing more flexible than a human. Right? They can do every single task in the warehouse, right? They've been trained, obviously, but they can get on a forklift, they can go and sweep, they can go to packing, they can load a truck, they can clean a spill, everything. Automation just does that repetitive task that we talked about with the steam crane at the beginning, right? It chooses a repetitive task and it automates it, but it reduces the flexibility now within that operation to do anything else. And that's key. That's why you have to have that set system process thinking before you take the leap into automation, because if you do it the other way around, it's painful.
Automation is highly productive when it's in the band that it's designed for, and highly unproductive when it's not. Right? It shells off the sides of that bell curve really quickly, right? So
it almost exposes those those things, right?
So if you've delivered the system to do something other than what the business needed, even if that was the system the business asked for, or the business specified, or the consultant specified, that is what you get. And if you don't load it with what it needs, it won't give you the outcome you need, right? So if you've tried to buy a plane instead and you actually needed a helicopter, you're going to get the wrong outcome, right?
Very. And so susceptible. Like I remember we used to have a set rule, and again, might be another automation podcast where we talk about how to design these systems properly. But we had all these steps, right? Everything from SKU profile to throughput to order profile to amount of stock on hand. All of that affects it. I've seen systems get crippled by a change in units per line from 5 down to 3. And it literally cripples the system, right? Because if you're picking 3 units per presentation versus 5 units per presentation, makes a huge difference. Huge, right? And to Richard's point, they're often designed with quite narrow bands of performance. And that's where really, again, consultants, we've made these mistakes or we've seen them made, and we can take that into account from the very beginning, making sure that you're automating the correct processes.
And also that the operation is being stood up to work within that band, and that's a commercial thing. So what you see sometimes is the sales and marketing guys have actually got to sell in a certain way to deliver to operations the need. You know, what the customers are buying is what they have to deliver, right? So they need to line up their business functions within the constraints of the process and the system that they're establishing, right?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I love this conversation. It's good. Sort of running out of time here. So one thing, I guess, tying this all back to where we've come from and where we are now, I wanted to touch on the mobile robotics part because I guess that's kind of this transition we're going through at the moment with the fixed automation to mobile automation. Does that help in that aspect of flexibility? Like, the mobile solutions, do they help in that aspect?
I would say yes, but mainly because they're modifiable and scalable and a little more easily.
But also, like a shelf. A robot shelf, like the shelf that we know as an AMR, that is the most configurable pick face you can get.
Because
I've seen them holding surfboards. I've seen them hanging goods. I've seen them holding, nuts and bolts and taking it at 1.5 ton. Infinite, whatever fits on that 1200 by 1200 footprint, you can configure that pick face. So that is true flexibility. But then you really have to think about the way that you're sequencing into the pick stations and everything. So absolutely. And I think when we talk about mobile has enabled people with less CapEx to get in. Scalability is huge, right? You start with small system, even a proof of concept, and scale from there based on how that works.
I feel especially in New Zealand, that starting to see that upkeep now. I think Australia has been doing it a long time, but starting to finally see some New Zealand businesses get into the mobile side of things.
Yeah, for whatever reason, and I don't know why this is, because I've been working in Australia and New Zealand for a long time, is New Zealand businesses have for some time seemed to be less able or willing to fund capital in the supply chain. And that's been a big barrier. So business cases in Australia have often been easier in my experience because the capital investment has been easier to apply. And if anyone wants to look up New Zealand statistics on labour productivity,
efficiencies, I've seen some.
In Australia, you might find that there's a big difference there, and I wonder if that's part of the contributor, right? So,
100%. I've seen some. I've seen the recent. I can't remember what the report was, but
Institute of Economic Research report came out of March this year. It's pretty dire reading. It's
pretty bad for New Zealand. Like we're below a lot of countries, in that space.
We're better, and we're proud of it, but not that much better. Most of the world is way ahead of us in terms of productivity.
This is a really big part of my why, in terms of why I do what I do, right? Like, as much as I personally enjoy playing in this space and working with this technology, and I nerd in that way in all the best ways, I don't want my kids to be wage slaves. Right? I don't want my kids to grow up in a low-wage economy where we're not getting, where we fall off the curve and we can't afford modern healthcare, right? Like, this is the part that we're playing, is we're helping organizations unlock that productivity so we can get better workplaces. So we don't have people doing rubbish tasks.
So we can compete with international markets.
Wouldn't you rather have one guy getting paid more supervising 10 robots than sweeping the floor? Right? Or picking and packing in a dingy...
Doing 10 kilometres of picking a day. And
We want to get our steps up, right? But maybe we want to do it on our time. So,
we want to pay that gym membership. We don't want to.
I've been in some really, really terrible word. I was going to use another word, but some places that are just not great places to work in. Right? Who wants to work in 25 degrees below C on a forklift with no enclosure?
We're seeing companies struggle in that area in Australia and New Zealand, like just trying to find staff that do want to work in those environments. It's becoming harder and harder. So we're
getting a lot of business cases over the line on risk basis rather than financial payback at the moment for that reason in the provinces. It would be worth touching on a couple of points. So our business in New Zealand is actually quite heavily weighted towards the manufacturing and primary industry sectors because that is, and New Zealand's export sectors, right? They've been investing more in that space because they are typically manufacturers. They do have access to capital. They're more capital intensive anyway. And so that means lots of stuff like cold chain and provincial locations, right? That is labour scarcity, right? I mean, nobody wants to work for low wages and terrible conditions at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? So let's automate that. They literally can't get staff in a lot of places. And so they literally can't deliver for their customers, which is a business existential threat. So they automate, all right? I guess, we're lagged a bit in New Zealand on the retail and sort of ambient shed side of things, which, we need to get over that and move on, invest more in the space. But those organisations seem to have had less capital availability or willing to commit it.
Do you feel that's part of our responsibility to, teach the industry? I know it's definitely,
I think there's a couple of things with it. I mean, some of it's just psychology, as no one wants to be first, right? So you want to have a few. As soon as you've seen a few successful site implementations, people get a lot more comfortable that they can do it too.
Or FOMO.
So people, we're great at jumping on the bandwagon eventually, right? But also it's been a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense, is that you need organisational maturity and people with the skills to either do the change projects or operate the new way of doing things, right? The industry has to invest in solutions people and invest in capability and operations as much as because you can deliver them a great shiny asset, but without the organisational capability to employ that asset in the business's interests and maintain it, sustain it, or do all those things, what's it worth to you, right? I could buy an F1 car. Maybe we should do that. No, we won't do that.
But what can you do with it, right? You can't take it to 300 kilometers an hour anywhere.
No.
I might die.
Or you do, you kill yourself.
I'm either going to stall it getting out of the garage, or I'm going to drive it into the wall, right? And that's what businesses, I think like. They go, well, I understand this, I'm comfortable with this, and I understand how to make this work in my business. Am I willing to risk moving into this new space for 20% benefit?
No, I'll just hire 20 more people. It's easier.
And I
if
can,
they're available.
And it's always the risk thing is, well, this works as long as the growth comes or this thing happens or that thing happens, but it's not a certainty. And if I don't have to make a decision, I can kick that can down the road and employ some more people for a while. That's often it looks attractive. So anyway,
just maybe to wrap up, we started off with the history, right? And we're seeing how we're developing, right? And it's really the people factors, the property factors, the fact that technology is more available now. I think one of the pieces that's really starting to become quite prevalent is the fact that warehouses are no longer dusty old sheds, right? They have large infrastructure requirements, specifically around connectivity, right? And this is really somewhere where mobile automation has forced the industry to kind of mature, right? The wireless technology. I'm now working with a business that's also looking to bring 5G into the warehouse, which I think in terms of what's coming, this is where I want to finish, personally at least, is, mobile automation has forced us to bring robots closer, right? We can literally touch the robot when we're picking now. It's right there. And that's meant that we've also now had a big step forward in what we call collaborative robotics as well, which is robotics that we can actually touch. And then on top of that, now we're seeing the rise of the humanoid. Okay, the humanoid robot, we're seeing applications in the US, and when we talk about these risk profiles, the US, they love being leaders. They don't mind failing. Australia is slightly more aggressive in terms of that than New Zealand, which I find is a very conservative market. But we're seeing that being able to facilitate that additional connectivity in the warehouse, the data transfer, we talk about the Internet of Things, this is where it becomes real.
Start making business decisions based on data, right?
Exactly. And then that's where, I love the analogy that Richard said, the future should look like warehouse operator is actually managing robots. So a robot can be better than a person at a specific task. But a robot plus a person will always be better than a robot or a person on their own. And that's really where we're heading, right? How do we enable our operations with robotics, with technology, with mechanization to get more out of the people and for them to have more meaningful, because that is what gets me out of bed as well.
I love that quote. We'll have to put that on the wall, Jeff 2024.
So that's my 2 cents.
Cool, no, fantastic.
So I guess my closing thoughts are, I think we need to be working together across the industry, in terms of the thinking and the capability build in the industry, right? No, there are very few organisations that have enough critical mass to go it alone for the industry as a whole, and then just have everybody coattail them. So I think people actually need to work together. Smaller firms need to band together with other smaller firms to go on that journey in parallel, share learnings with each other, all that sort of stuff, because otherwise everybody's having to fund all of the learning themselves, and that's a barrier. So I want to see people engaging more with the industry bodies, engaging more with each other, and working together as a community to lift the bar in this. And if you compare logistics with some other industries are way more intentional about taking the time out of the day-to-day, because operations is always on fire. Right. Operational horizons are like 2 p.m. today, right? It's very hard to be thinking about how do I implement something I have to land in 18 months when I've got a thing that's on fire that I need to sort out at 2 p.m. today.
Yeah, correct.
So we actually need to have the resources and the organisations to take people out of that day-to-day firefighting. Not just give your operations manager the project manager job too, right? The guy's got an operations run, for God's sake, give him a break. Don't task him with delivering $50 million worth of projects on top of that and just go, just chuck it at him.
Give it to a consultant.
or an actual project manager.
Project manager,
who's good at it, knows how to do it. Don't ask people to work so far outside their comfort zone. Take your ops manager out, make him a transition manager. Put a backfill operations manager in there. Have the right project structure and invest in the project, or invest in the change, and invest in the organisational capability, both within the organisation and across the community at large. Is my ask of people.
Yeah, no, my closing points, it's been fantastic talking to you guys about this, because I think it's, Australia, New Zealand, there's a lot of work to be done, and we're hoping, I guess, as Automate X, that we can, with podcasts like this, we can open the conversation and we can keep talking about it, because likewise, I feel like the more we work with with the companies, I guess consultants like you guys and even competitors, you're right, there's a lot you can learn off each other. We're all going to get work. We're all going to, do this thing together. So, appreciate your time. I know you've probably still in Australian time for the jet lag, but thanks for being on the podcast. And we could probably do this for a few hours, but
I think
we're only warming up.
There's a few things we discussed which I'd love to go deeper into, especially on the efficiency side of things in New Zealand,
the design
Australia.
level, I think, is a really big one as well.
Design.
Just data in general.
So I'm sure this won't be the last time, but
perfect.
Appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Love to be back.
Awesome.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.